Okay, so I'd like to welcome you to You Should Ask Before Copying That Media. This is special for the web development team. We're having to re-record this, so I'm kind of doing this on my own and in a quiet corner. I'm going to try to remember all the questions you guys asked me before so we can kind of cover those. So you can see some of the cool things that we talked about in the class when I gave the presentation. Unfortunately, the audio had blown out on the original, so we're going to recreate it and have some fun with it. So here's why you should ask before copying that media. One of the biggest things that you want to understand is licensing. Licensing is really important. When you want to go ahead and you use something off the internet, when you just want to copy a picture or something, it helps make you, if you understand what Creative Commons means, you're going to be doing yourself a huge favor. Especially when you get let others copy, display, attribution, your copyrighted work, and derivative works based upon it, but they have to give you credit. Non-commercial means you can let others do things with it, but they can't do it for non-commercial purposes. And one of the things that makes this really interesting is if you have advertising on the side of your website, that may mean that you're doing this as a commercial project. Sometimes it all depends on how many. If it looks like it's only like 2 or 3, most photographers aren't going to sweat it. But if it's a page of ads and nothing but ads and then your picture, and it becomes a little bit more twitchy. And non-commercial is really up to the photographer whose picture or the videographer whose movie you're using. No derivatives works means you can use it, but you can't change it. And share alike means you can allow others to do cool things with it, but they have to use the same license you use. This is a really fairly common in use. There's tons of free pictures available underneath Creative Commons, and we'll go over where you can find Creative Commons pictures that you can use. One of the big ones is Flickr has an entire set called Explore Creative Commons. There's almost 40 million pictures that are just attribution only. Go ahead and use those. Just make sure that whoever you use them from gets credit for using it. Whole gallery sets based on this. And if you go through and you take a look at what's actually in here, bring up the commons a little bit. The whole idea is that you can use these on your websites, and there's tons of really cool stuff that you can go and you can search and you can find and you can use. It's usually attribution only. So if we wanted to find carrots, then we could bring up pictures if there's any in the commons for carrots, salad. It just all depends on what's in here. So if you're looking for a picture of a salad, there's a chef with a picture of the salad. You can use it. He's chopping stuff and you're in pretty good shape. So these are things that you can then turn around and use for what you've got cooking, right? And let me go ahead and bring this back up big screen. So, these are people who want you to use their pictures, and you can use them pretty much so free and clear. Another one is Smugmug. Smugmug is really a site for a lot of really professional photographers. It's basically the gigantic warehouse. Smugmug doesn't explicitly state the copyright. Most will assume that the copyright there is all copyright all the way, but some will put their copyright in the search engine data. So if you do a quick search on Smugmug, you can actually find people that are doing stuff in Creative Commons. So this picture here was tagged Creative Commons non-commercial use. Please contact the photographer. And he's out there in Aspen, Colorado, and he's doing cool things. So you could, if you needed a picture of Aspen, Colorado, you could go out here, ask the photographer if you can use the picture, and then you're pretty much so good. So if you just did a quick search on Creative Commons, smugmug.com, you can find all the Creative Commons that are tagged like that, but you should follow the directions of the photographer for whose work that you want to use for your website or for your movie. Now, there's always complications. I'm just going to focus on Washington State because that's where we're at, right? Your state law will vary, sometimes widely. There's some really interesting processes that go along because you don't know if the picture is encumbered. And what I mean by encumbered is that you don't know if that picture has something that's going on with it that may involve you in a lawsuit or an argument or something else. Because you don't know if the photographer did it right. If you have performance pieces, if you have someone who's doing a dance or a gig or playing a guitar, those will fall underneath right to publicity and right of performance. Right? Most artists have the ability to call right of publicity and right of performance. These are inside the RCWs here at Washington. If it's a model, then you have to make sure the model releases were done right. And you have to worry about public versus private photography, and then you have to worry about law enforcement. And law enforcement does some really interesting things along the way. Now, you may have not not heard of right of publicity, and I'm relatively new to this. I've just learned about this probably in the last couple of months because of an event that happened. That I have about 800 pictures where an artist called right of publicity and right of performance, and perfect, one of those things. So if the photographer did not have a release and took a picture of an artist, the artist can request to have it taken down. It's very simple, very straightforward. If the picture has been downloaded and copied, the photographer could be at fault. If the picture is hosted locally on someone else's web server or used on a separate website, then the website operator can be at fault. And right now the penalties can be steep. In Washington State, the penalties are up to $1,500 per image or per occurrence. So before I had to take these pictures down, about 4,000 people saw them. So 1,500 by 4,000 is more money than I make in my lifetime. So that could have been horrible if I hadn't taken them down and done what I needed to do. Artists have a right to publicity. So if you're going to go use someone else's right of publicity picture, then you have to worry about it. Then there's a right of performance, right? If the venue where a public-private performance did not get a performance release, any imagery of the performance cannot be used without permission by the venue, the photographer, or other parties. This includes marketing, this includes media, this includes all the rest of it. Now, artists can sue and win if the venue did not have a right of performance release. So if as a photographer, if you're going in there, if you don't have a model release or you don't have a performance release, then basically what you're doing is you're taking pictures of people that can actually take your pictures down. If you copy those pictures onto your own website to use them for whatever reason, then you really have to worry about it, right? Because then you could get wrapped up into any kind of ugliness that's happening between the photographer, the venue, and the performance person, right? Using an image off the internet does not imply that the proper legal forms were used. Right of publicity or performance might not have been granted. Right? You may have snagged something and then the originals were taken down, and then all of a sudden you find yourself in a world of pain because the artist is holding on to you and holding on to the photographer, and you don't have permission to use that picture. The photographer doesn't. Maybe it got posted in error. There's all sorts of things that can go wrong with this. Right of performance, there are some caveats to this. If it's a First Amendment issue, if it is a performance on a street and the cops come in and bust up the performance, then that's a First Amendment right. I have a right to take pictures of people doing stupid things. Parody or satire, I can do anything for parody or satire. If I want to parody a particular person and I have a picture of that, then I'm good to go. Satire, we can do that too. Right of performance or model release were obtained after the pictures or video were taken, right? So if I do the pictures of the event, I take the pictures, and I get a model release or a venue release afterwards, then I'm pretty much so good to go, right? Now, there were signs in the venue that explicitly state that photography is going to happen, right? And that the people in the venue waive all rights based on being there. And sometimes those pictures will show up. Sometimes you need to take a picture of the picture so that of that sign, so that you're covered on that one from the photographer's viewpoint. But from you taking that picture, you may not understand that there was a sign there, and then the person in the picture may get hold of you and say take it down, where the picture is actually fairly legal. And then the contract is part of ticket sales. If you take a look at the back of most tickets, they may say that videotaping is going to happen and all the rest of it. I don't know if you've ever been to a former nightclub downtown called the Fun House. In their last week, there was actually a documentary done, and they had posted up pictures and signs all over the place because the documentary was being filmed on the Funhouse. That if you're in there, then you're consenting to be photographed, to be videographed, and all the rest of it. So you can actually see that as part of the ticket sales when you kind of go through there, especially when something cool is happening in the venue. You automatically grant a waiver of any rights that you may have to your picture showing up someplace that you didn't expect. Now, model releases. Now, some photographers do not or are not able to obtain a full model release. Right? In that case, the pictures of the model become encumbered if there's a dispute between the model and the photographer that you may not be aware of. Copying that picture of a model can result in a second liability to the website serving the picture of that model, especially if the originals have been taken down. The originals were meant for a private or limited audience, like they were behind a password or something else. Now, model release is not in a full legal name. Some models actually will use a stage name, and that stage name may not necessarily be legal. If you use someone's full, you have to have their full legal name. So some photographers will just grab a release in the model stage name, and those are not always enforceable. There's always something that can happen in there, especially as part of the whole process. Most models do use a stage name, so it's kind of weird. You kind of have to play that one out in the courts and see what happens, right? Public versus private centers on the argument of expectation and privacy. Now, if you're on a street corner and you need a picture of someone on a street corner, then that picture is probably okay. You're not going to worry about a lot of encumbrance. Taking pictures of the bedroom window is not okay, even if the curtains are open. There's an expectation of privacy in their bedroom or in their bathroom. Selfies. These are pictures of people that they're taking of themselves in their bathroom, in the bathroom mirror, or in their living room, or whatever. You know, it's okay as long as they're of legal age. You have to kind of worry about that because a lot of kids now do a lot of sexting. They take pictures of themselves scantily clad. You may run afoul of child porn laws and not even realize that you're doing it. So you kind of have to be a little bit careful with selfies, especially if someone from your website. Because you really, the expectation of privacy was that they took a picture in their bathroom. If they shared it with one
person, shared it with their boyfriend, and then the boyfriend shared it with everybody else, then the boyfriend is liable for whatever legal consequences of that happen. Now, taking pictures of police, fire, emergency services are okay as long as you stay out of the way. And if you obey requests to stay away and not be in the way. If you're going to use a police, fire, emergency services picture, you kind of want to go through and make sure that the picture looks like that the photographer wasn't involved in an embroiled suit or anything else because they were in the way. Federal buildings, power plants, shipyards are not okay. Most police will cite the Terrorism Act. If you post it on your website, they may cite national security, they may cite Patriot Act, they may cite anything because of all the rest of it. One of the things that's kind of interesting is when I did my last trip to London, we were down in Paddington Station. And Paddington Station is one of the big train stations there, and I was having fun taking pictures of the architecture and all the rest of it. And then someone comes and taps me on my shoulder, and it's a British policeman asking me to not take pictures. And then I said, "What?" in my American accent, and he said, "Oh, you're a tourist. Okay, go ahead and take pictures of the architecture, but don't do grand sweeping pictures of the building because someone might use that as a way to plot a terrorism attack." So if you have a big sweeping picture of Paddington Station, you may be secondarily liable because you're posting these pictures up and either the government or an agency wants them taken down. So I never posted those pictures of Paddington Station. I have them buried away. I have about 4,000 pictures that I've taken over the years that I can't post online because of some kind of encumbrance, whether it's a bad model release or because it was a federal building, a power plant, a shipyard, or something else. Riots, protests, and marches are all okay. I'm looking forward to the next May Day thing here in Seattle. But if someone asks you to stay out of the way, you should do so. So when we were down at the Westlake Center taking pictures of the protests and all the rest of it, we actually have pictures of one of the protesters being hit and run by a car that broke the cordon of the protesters. Those pictures I did not post online, but I did give a copy to the police and to the person that got hit. Of course, the person thankfully was not hurt badly. But trying to get the ambulance and all the rest of it through, those pictures I've kept private because it was an accident, it was a crime, and then we turn around and we turn those over to the proper authorities. Now, I have other really good pictures of riots and protesters and marches and all the rest of it. So it actually ended up being a really good photo shoot as far as I was concerned. But part of that is that I caught a crime in progress in film, and I need to make sure that those got to the right space and did the right thing for the people, right? Now, this is one of my most interesting pictures that I've ever taken. So it's a public-private problem. So this is a picture of a rioter and a policeman, all right? It's clearly identifiable people in a public space in a public event. You don't know where it came from if you just pulled it off my website and then you want to ask if I can use it. Well, I'm hoping that you would ask me. But the other thing too is that this is my most often requested picture to be taken down, because in the background here, apparently from what I understand from the original takedown that was requested, there's actually an undercover FBI agent in this picture, and I have a fairly good view of the policeman and the rioter and then the people in the background that aren't even paying attention to this little drama that's going on in the foreground. So who would have known that there's an undercover FBI agent in there doing his own thing? And I've had this picture requested to be taken down so many times. The problem is we don't know which one of these people is the undercover FBI agent. So since I'm not identifying them, then again, we don't know who it is in this picture. I'm not going to take it down because it's public space, public event, my copyright, we're good to go. But if you use this picture and put it on your website, then you may get a takedown from an authority or law enforcement asking you to take that picture down because there's an undercover agent in there, and that would kind of freak your day out. Most people don't like takedowns, especially when they're coming from the federal government. Those get a little bit freaky. So there is no simply copy a picture. Even those Instagram pictures of
food and clothing and people hanging out and having a good time. In Section 4, you represent or warrant that you own the content copyright, that there's no misappropriation or infringement of the rights of any third party, including without limitation privacy, publicity, copyrights, trademarks, or intellectual property rights, and that you agree to pay for all royalties, fees, and other for the reason of the content you post to the service, right? So you need to make sure that when you kind of go through this, that if you are taking pictures of someone's designer furniture, or I have fashion show pictures that were meant to be private, and you snagged one of those fashion show pictures, and then you posted it on Instagram, those pictures may be encumbered. There's actually an earlier lawsuit of people who were taking pictures of furniture, and that furniture was actually copyrighted, the designs, and they only wanted the pictures of that furniture to show up in certain magazines and all the rest of it. The furniture was actually incidental. It was actually in the background of a couple of models. So because of that, those pictures had to come down off the internet because they were violating the intellectual property rights of whoever had built that furniture. So kind of interesting. Everything comes encumbered, and there is no simply copying a picture. You may not know what those encumbrances are, right? You may not know about any rights that were obtained with that picture. Some concert footage can be taken down at the source, but your copy could result in a separate takedown that can be kind of freaky. You might be unaware of any releases or not releases that were obtained from the subject. You might be unaware of any litigation surrounding the photograph or video that's causing you to get swept up in a lawsuit, right? And that's a big one, right? If I get sued for a picture that I took and you happen to have a copy of that picture on your website, then you're going to get swept up in that lawsuit, and that's a bad day. And this includes selfies, right? You might not be informed if a picture is taken down later opening up your website for a single lawsuit for reposting. In other words, I may do all the right things and take those pictures down because that's what was the correct thing to do, but then if you have a copy of that picture and you put it up on your website and you're using it, then you can be sued later on underneath right of privacy, right of publicity, right of performance, or any of these other things that kind of go along with it. So you really want to kind of make sure about it. So what you can do, I will always recommend that you contact a photographer. And the reason why I do this is because I get about 2 million legitimate picture views a year over the body of work that I do. When you include all the other extra stuff that goes along with it, I get about 4 million. So I have 2 million registered picture views, but I have double that when it comes to pictures that have been just found themselves out on the internet. Usually, if you contact me and ask me, can I use your picture for this process, I will say yes. That's really not a hard thing. If I find the copy of my picture and you didn't ask and you're using it to commercially make money, so if you're Der Spiegel or your KUOW or your Como or your Seattle Weekly, and these people usually ask except for Der Spiegel, and they just got a big, huge bill from me, I have a right to say no, but I also have a right to say yes. And you definitely don't want my $1,500 per picture bill, because what I do is I write up the bill, I send it to you, I wait 90 days because you won't pay it, and then I turn it over to a collection agency over here in Seattle. I sell it for 25 cents on the dollar, so out of the $1,500 I get like $300-400 out of it, and then it's the collection agency's issue to go find them. The collection agency is very effective when it comes to it. You can always purchase a license for the picture, but it's usually expensive. They get range from dollars to hundreds of dollars. The average licensing fee that I'm aware of is about $350 for a picture. Use or search Flickr's Creative Commons or Smugmug's Creative Commons to pull the pictures that are open to use. And again, ask. Always credit the photographer. You don't need to ask if you stick to CC pictures, but you do want to follow however they put it. And most of them are just going to be attribution only. So attribution is good, right? So we did have some pictures or some questions when they came up from this. So one of the things that we talked about is one way, especially if you blog, right? Zemana actually goes through and uses the Flickr Commons and any other pictures that it can find to go through this. So because you have the Commons here, Zemana will automatically tie the content you're building into WordPress or Drupal or any of the other CMS systems, so you can pull directly from the Commons for the web page that you're writing. And it's usually a really, really good, handy thing to do. So the Flickr Commons is a really good way of finding out really cool pictures that you can use for whatever you want to do, right? And this is a really, really safe way of just using a picture off the rest of it, right? So the other thing too is if you want to pay for licensing, there's also the Getty collection. So A lot of photographers on Flickr will go through and do Getty images, call for artists, and they'll go ahead and they'll do the stock photography. Getty images can be kind of expensive if you want to use those. It can be, but the Commons is a real simple way of doing stuff, right? There's also, and this is the thing I found interesting, is Flickr Hive Mind, right? And they go through, when they pull stuff, they're only pulling from the stuff that's Creative Commons. They really don't pull anything that's been full copyrighted by the artist, but you'll always want to check and see if that picture's been encumbered. So what you can do is they say all rights reserved, so you can't use this picture. But that's the cool part about Flickr Hive Mind, is that you can actually go through and then do a search on Creative Commons and do a search on the tags. And then here's a bunch of pictures that may or may not be royalty free. So here's a picture of a building, some rights reserved, and then you can go through and you can actually click on the license and find out. You are free to share, remix, and make commercial use of the work under the following attributions. Attribution only. So this is why this is really kind of a good thing, right? Now, again, I can always change that and all the rest of it. Fair use and other problems that go along with it. Fair use is another process. If you take a picture and you use it in a parody or satire site, then that modifies or transforms the work. But it also becomes your version of free speech. So you kind of want to take that and see if you can work with the photographer for what you're trying to do. But there's a lot of really cool stuff underneath Creative Commons. There's a lot of really cool things that you can find in Flickr Hive Mind. If you don't like the interface for the Commons over here, Flickr Hive Mind is good. And again, it takes you right to the licensing so you can find out how they did it. And again, as long as it's free to copy, distribute, and transmit the work, you can use it on your website, you're good to go. And that's where this gets to be really kind of fun, in terms of the pictures that you can use on your website and how you build things out and how you want to do stuff. So that's basically the speech. I know this is a little bit shorter than the one that we actually recorded in the classroom, but this basically covers the whole 9 yards of what we did. So if you have any questions, feel free to get hold of me. Write a comment on YouTube or wherever else this thing gets posted.